The pill.
The pill.
The pill.
Don't forget to take your pill. I won't.
An estimated 12 million American women use the pill, and about 80% will use it at some point in their reproductive lives.
Birth control is here to stay.
Birth control is so inextricably tied into our freedom as women, but only half the story is being told.
This idea that we've been sold that you should just take the pill and get rid of your hormones is really potentially dangerous.
When you change a person's level of sex hormones, it's going to change the person that their brain is creating.
I've tried 5 different kinds of birth control pills. Every single one of them has made me suicidal.
We've known since the 60s it's having effects on our bone density, on our mood, and on our libido.
As women of color, our fertility has always been fear-based. It's always been managed to move ahead modern gynecology that we see today.
These women, they're suffering the consequences of these side effects. Here you have women who are essentially, once again, being used as guinea pigs.
5 women died on the trial in Puerto Rico. Of course, they said that had nothing to do with the pill.
He downplayed the bad news that showed safety problems and highlighted the good news.
You are not going to sit quietly any longer. You are murdering us.
If your daughter died as a result of pulmonary embolisms, stroke, or heart attack, would you still consider this drug as having an acceptable risk factor?
First of all, I can only imagine how difficult that is.
Actually.
I'm told that I should file a report with the FDA, who said, unfortunately, we don't have enough funding to respond to all of these. And I said, but my daughter died. Don't you want to know more about why my daughter died?
This needs to have a label right on the front, like cigarettes say, this can kill you. This needs to say the same thing.
We want people to have information, real information. And let's see what people do with that real information once they really know.
No justice, no peace.
Reproductive justice, it's really about women's right to protect their body.
When something is so inextricably tied into women's lives, we have to look at everything that it takes for us to actually live healthy.
The most feminist approach to the conversation around contraceptives is options.
Well, welcome to the BraveMaker partnership with Hana Wellness Company and the business of birth control. We're having a great discussion tonight. I'm really excited to be able to be facilitating and hosting with our partner, Hana Ilg. Welcome, Hana.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Excited that we finally, so many people have gotten to watch it because of this and ready to discuss.
It's happening right on. So, hey, if you are watching live, we would love to know. You can let us know that you're in the watch room by commenting in the chat. And if you want to say where you are, you're also going to be invited to ask questions or make any comments about how the documentary impacted you. And Hana, like, talk about kind of what your hope is for this event tonight.
Yeah. It's funny. I just got like chills watching that trailer again. I just watched the documentary. Yeah, I just really excited to hear people's feedback, because what is so many people, once they watch it, they're like, I need to talk more about it. You know, it really leaves it open-ended at the end to the documentary of like, okay, what's next? What are some of the solutions? So that's what I'm excited to talk about. Yeah.
Right on. Well, before we get going, I know you've got a cool giveaway you want to talk about, but if you are watching this live again, please make sure we know you're around. And if you're watching this after the fact, this will be living on forever in perpetuity. So hopefully this could be a resource for you to please share the link. And then if you haven't watched the film at the time that you're watching this, to seek it out, because it's available on multiple platforms. And I know it's going to have a big release coming up soon. So yeah. So Hana, tell us about the thing you're doing, and then we'll introduce our guests.
Yeah. So we'll bring on our panelists in a second. I just want to say I'm doing a raffle for people who join. I'm raffling off one of my video courses. I have Fertility Method video courses, and we'll probably discuss a little bit more what that is. So I'll be giving one away, and to one lucky winner, but you get entered for the raffle. You get multiple entries. So one, if you join the Q&A, or signed up for it. 2, if you join live, and 3, if you share a takeaway from the documentary and tag us in it. So I was gonna, Tony, post about those details. I can't figure out how to post.
Oh yeah, if you just post it in the private chat, I can cut.
There we go. Okay,
Yep.
so there's the questions for people, and I'll post
Yeah.
those details so you guys can see it.
Okay, awesome. Well, great. I will be in the chat if anybody has anything to share. And as Hana puts those out there, I will be resharing them as well as links from our guest panelists that we'll bring out now. Let's bring them out.
Yeah, we want to hear from you all. So if you post in the comments. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, Lauren, and welcome, Grace. We'll have you two introduce yourselves. Lauren, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you all. I am a reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist, which is a very long title. But what that means is I help women balance their hormones. I explore the links between hormones and women's reproduction, and really do help women who have abnormal cycles, be it irregular cycles, painful cycles, heavy bleeding, and women who are dealing with fertility issues or miscarriages. And recently, I began my integrative medicine fellowship as well at the Andrew Weil Center over at the University of Arizona. So I have a very unique lens looking at the REI field. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Grace, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining with us tonight. My name is Grace Emily Stark. I am the editor of Natural Womanhood. That is a website dedicated to really getting women to understand and know their bodies. I'm a fertility awareness educator and advocate. I'm a trained instructor of the symptothermal method. And I'm a writer, mainly on the topic of women's health. And really excited to be here tonight and discuss this, what I feel is a really groundbreaking film.
I agree. That's why BraveMaker loves doing these things. Provocative films, provocative stories. They really, truly can create change. So if you're watching on the replay, my name is Tony Gapistone, and I will be facilitating, founder of BraveMaker. All of the links and things that our panelists talk about today will be in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, they'll be there forever. So let's get into this. What do you think needs to change to help create more informed consent around birth control? Who wants to
I
take
thought that was really my biggest takeaway from the film was this push for we just need more education and more informed consent. And sometimes you feel like the takeaway was like, okay, let's get everybody off birth control. But I really don't think that is what they were saying. You know, it's really, let's give people options and the full truth. So yeah, I would love that the solution be, you know, that women who are getting prescribed birth control get the informed consent or the full risk factors, benefits, and risks from their doctors. I feel like that would be the most appropriate place to get it. Do I have hope that that will happen? Not really. So my other, solution, I think, is really what this documentary is doing, and it's more of a grassroots, person to person, woman to woman, sharing stories. And I think that's what people listen to the most, and what will get people to pay attention. So that's kind of what stood out to me as to how we can help people get more informed consent.
I'd like to, like to jump in there because Hana, something you just said really struck me, that you don't feel like women are going to get this information from their doctors. And I think that's really the crux of it, is that we talk about women needing education about birth control side effects and really about their bodies in order to be able to give informed consent. But I think it really needs to go even back a step further to medical education. Doctors need to be told about these things, because I don't necessarily think that it's in bad faith that when you go to your OBGYN and you tell them, I'm on the pill, I'm depressed, I am gaining all this weight. And, we hear time and time again stories at Natural Womanhood, women tell us, my doctor told me birth control doesn't do that. And so they feel gaslighted. And I don't necessarily think it's in bad faith that their doctors are telling them that. I legitimately think most doctors are completely unaware that birth control can do so many of these things, that it has these widespread effects all over a woman's body. And there is an organization actually called FACTS. It's FACTS. And they are actually working to better inform doctors during their medical education and in their continuing education, even post medical school, about fertility awareness and about the side effects and kind of the detriments of hormonal contraception. And I'm sure Dr. Rubal can speak even more to this, being an MD herself. So
that gives me hope, though, just hearing that, like that there's somebody out there working to go from top down, and whereas I'm like, I don't know how to do that, so I'm gonna work from bottom up.
Yeah, I can share their webpage.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Box here. So yeah.
I have to echo both of you. I mean, again, and I love the point that you made. I think that education is key. I think knowledge is power. It's one of my favorite mantras. And I completely agree that we all have to be our own best advocates. And I think that is because it's really important to understand what's going on with your body and for your body, number one, but also because the current model of this system, I think in many ways, can be optimized in the sense that, number one, for education for healthcare providers, absolutely. And number two, even in the structure of the visits, right? And I know, and I say this because I was one of those doctors in the past, in the sense that you don't have much time. You're trying to address a myriad conditions, and you want to help that patient so much, but it's not only that you feel a little bit ill-equipped because of perhaps this less of a focus on this part of it, but also because of just a time pressure and constraint, okay? And I always laugh because back in, I used to do I was a very traditional REI. I was giving out birth control pills for a lot of different reasons. And I'll tell you, I tell this story all the time. I just started feeling more and more like I was treating ovaries in a vacuum. And I wasn't focused on the whole person, body, mind, soul, that I was putting lots of Band-Aids on things and never actually healing anyone. And that really prompted this, my greatest career achievement, which is actually leaving that partnership behind and embarking on this new way to address those root causes and heal them holistically, which is what we're all talking about, right? So, so I think that's what the film also embraces is understand your body, understand that you have to seek a true informed consent, and that also, if someone tells you something, it's never a bad idea to create that brain test and get more than one opinion or get more resources on it.
Yeah, and what you said about tuning into yourself and your own body and that personal responsibility, I think so at the essence of this, that kind of has caused this issue as well, why people keep accepting that this is like, okay, we just have to take the pill, like we have to be on hormonal birth control, like that's just kind of the accepted norm. And so kind of waking that up, that like we can question this, and that, like you're saying, you were prescribing birth control all the time, and it is the right choice for many people at certain times, but also the questioning of I think part of the informed consent and taking personal responsibility is just questioning, like, do I really need to be on this from 15 until I want to have a baby, So that kind of part too, it's not just what are the side effects, why am I on it for so long and so young? Those are two big issues I have with it. I don't know if they actually addressed that in the documentary, of just like the length of time and the age that girls get put on it as well.
Well,
yeah, that's.
Sorry, Gracie. We're so excited.
I keep doing this the whole time, I have a feeling. Yeah, that is such an important point to make, Hana. I'm glad that you bring that up, because I don't know that when the pill first came onto the market that it was necessarily intended that we'd be putting girls at age 14, age 15 on it and just keeping them on it until, they were 30. I don't think that there was that intention necessarily. I think it was largely meant, it came on the market in the 50s and 60s. I think it was largely intended for, and if you look at the Comstock laws and that sort of thing, targeted married women at first, married women who wanted to space pregnancies. And so I don't even think there was that foresight to think that we'd be putting teenage girls on it for literally decades. And there wasn't a lot of thinking of, well, what does it mean not only to be on this drug for, 10, 15, 20 years of your life, but what does it mean to not be ovulating, to not be menstruating during this crucial time of, pubertal development? And there was this really excellent edition of the Scientific American 3-4 years ago now, where they dedicated a whole issue to, they called it The Point of a Period. And it was kind of about the lost science of not the lost science, but kind of the undiscovered science of menstrual health. And there was a really poignant quote in there, and I forget who the physician was who quoted it, but she said something to the effect of, we worked so hard to supplant periods before we even tried to understand what they were for. And so, we've all seen the birth control commercials that tell women, oh, did you know that you don't even need to have a period? There's no medical reason to have a period. Well, more and more, we're finding out that that's not the case. Teenage girls who don't ovulate well, menstruate well, end up having, very brittle bones at, a very young age, because ovulation, turns out, is essential for laying down proper bone development during puberty. And it's specifically linked to ovulation, and girls and women who are on hormonal birth control, they're not ovulating, they're not menstruating. And that's the other big lie that I think someone addressed in the film, was that, the pill's not regulating your cycle. It's overriding it entirely. When you're on the pill, that bleed you have is not a period. It's a breakthrough bleed. And that might seem like an issue of semantics, but it's really not. In order for you to have a period, you have to first ovulate. And so you're taking sugar pills for 5 days out of the month. 5 of those pills in your pill pack are sugar pills, basically. And you're having a withdrawal bleed. You never ovulated. You're not menstruating. And I think it's time that women, ask, why are we being made to override, this essential biological mechanism for decades of our lives? And what are the effects of that? What are the consequences?
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what I was going to raise, is that we think about the fact that about 44% of teenage girls, 15 to 19, are on birth control pills for either contraceptive reasons or other reasons. They're prescribed for a whole host of other conditions. There are about 12 million teenage girls in the US. That's a staggering number. And then when you consider that, sorry, I'm having my little one broken. But when you consider that the pill completely is the opposite of what that beautiful cyclicity that we should expect of our hormones, that rise from that unopposed estrogen to progesterone together. And what you get with the pill is a flat line of this, and it's a mainly progestin dominant effect. And there are actually studies looking at this, showing that it can increase. Sorry, God, poor thing.
This is perfect. You want this. This is real life, y'all. No worries, Lauren. No worries. You get to be the mom who's also talking about, yep, this is great.
Yeah. And so basically, there are clear studies showing that that unfortunately new depression medication use increases. Almost 1 million Danish population cohort. This has been studied. It's doubled in girls of teenage age because of the brain plasticity. I mean, this whole host of mood disorders, and we couple that with the rise in social media and all of these other factors that our young girls are dealing with. And I completely agree with you. I think it's something that we are not addressing sufficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, those of you who are just tuning in, you're finding us, you're wondering, why is this guy facilitating this panel? The audience for this film is not just cis women. It's for anybody who cares about women's and women's rights and cares about the health of women. And I am really grateful to be able to partner in this way with you, Hana, and all of you presenters. So thank you so much. And I care.
I thought it was an important voice to have as well.
Yeah.
And you're a father of a teenage daughter.
I have 3 daughters, right? And so I learned a lot watching the documentary. And my wife and I come from a faith-based background, and we were first getting married. We were kind of scared out of the pill for all these reasons, and so we didn't use the pill. We did all these other things, and now I'm like, well, I wish I had a balanced understanding of the science. I didn't get that, so this gave me a really balanced perspective from doctors, not just like this is a faith perspective, from where I came from. So I really appreciated that, but I was really like wowed and also humbled and convicted watching the documentary as they talked about what the pill has done to marginalized people of color. The documentary touches upon that, like the hormonal birth control in the ways that it has been really negative to marginalized communities. So I wondered what you all thought about what that documentary surfaced. If you could talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, well, the pill was tested on, poor Puerto Rican women. Initially, that's kind of one of the dirty little secrets of the development of the pill. And one of the things that's frankly just horrifying is when you read through the correspondences between Margaret Sanger and Kathleen Mccormack, which I don't think a lot of people have heard that name before, but everybody probably has spice bottles in their cabinet that say McCormick Foods on them. So the heiress to McCormick Foods bankrolled a lot of pill research and development, along with Margaret Sanger, Gregory Pincus, and John Rock, who were the 2 physician scientists who were conducting a lot of the research on their patients. They tested on poor women in asylums in, the Boston area at first. And then when they thought they had a product that they could do clinical trials with, they moved to Puerto Rico. And at the time, they didn't tell women what they might experience on it. They just told them that they could take this pill and not get pregnant. And a lot of women were so desperate to plan pregnancy because the only alternative for them was to get a hysterectomy, that they, reportedly lined up for the pill. And again, without a whole lot of informed consent beyond, take this pill and you won't get pregnant. And in the film, they have, I believe, Mike Gaskins talk about, because he's done quite a bit of research on the research that went into pill development. And he talks about how, 5 women died during the clinical trials, and they really didn't even bother to follow up and figure out whether it was directly related to their use of the pill or not. So, really horrendous stuff that, we can look back and say, well, it was another time, but even the contemporary researchers, the John Rock and Gregory Pincus's contemporaries were a little bit hesitant at some of the things that they were doing, just the level of subterfuge with putting women on these things. And, the dropout rates were incredible. Women were going on these pills and just hating the side effects. The dosages were a lot stronger than they are now, but a lot of the side effects were still the same. And women were dropping out. They actually had Puerto Rican medical students, female medical students, on the pill. And when they dropped out, I forget who, one of those 4 suggested that maybe their grades should take a hit if they were going to drop out of the pill trials. So just a lot of icky stuff going on. And there was even a correspondence between Kathleen Mccormack and Margaret Sanger, where I believe it was Kathleen Mccormack who lamented, the high dropout rate and all of the trials that they were doing. They couldn't gather enough data to take it to the FDA at first. And she said, I wish we could find a cage of ovulating females to test on. So,
yeah. They mentioned that in the documentary too, trying to, it was, I think, women who worked for Planned Parenthood, trying to kind of repair that kind of dark history of Planned Parenthood with Margaret Sanger and the eugenics, and that was refreshing to see that they're like, okay, like we're gonna acknowledge that is our history, and how can we move forward and serve more women. So I thought
there was something that they wouldn't acknowledge for a long time, but they have made efforts to kind of reckon with it as of late, which is, a positive development for sure.
I think, like you mentioned, they were experiencing side effects, and I mean, the women I work with, they're even saying my doctors aren't taking me seriously, or they're not saying that my side effects that I'm experiencing are correlated to the pill, or whatever type of hormonal birth control. And I know a lot of the work that they're doing, trying to more permanent, not permanent, but long-term hormonal birth control solutions like the implant or IUD. It's a very interesting power dynamic to get something inserted in you that you can't take out on your own, and not having easy access to your doctor. I know this is discussed even with women in African countries, trying to help them with, how many children they have, but then when they're experiencing negative side effects, they don't have somebody to go to. They can't just stop taking the pill, and that's usually the solution that they give. I know in the documentary they talked about the history with welfare, and that they had to agree to, I think it was the implant, and that was just so infuriating. Like those things that you have to do in order to get access to certain rights and stuff. So so I know that's still going on, just the easy access, and it happens I'm also in the birth world as a doula, and it happens with women of color in birth as well, just doctors not taking their complaints seriously. And so they're just at a greater risk in birth. And so, it's just I'm just so glad the documentary shed light on that, because it's just it's a big part of the story that needs to be told.
I think they could have even they could have even gone further, because you mentioned, the contraceptive campaigns in developing countries, in African countries in particular. These contraceptive campaigns will roll into a village, be there for a week, and plant as many women as they can with these devices, and they leave. And so these women have no recourse for, removing the device, unless they can somehow get themselves to a major city where they might be able to find if it's the Nexplanon, you need surgery for that, an IUD. A lot of women during the pandemic who couldn't get appointments for routine care were going to TikTok and asking other women how to remove their own IUDs, because they wanted to get them out. And that was kind of a trending topic for a while there on TikTok. And so, that power dynamic of you have something in your body that you have no control over, that you're beholden to a doctor to take out for you. You throw in, the dynamics that already exist for women of color on top of that power dynamic just blows up. And Uju Ekeocha is a African woman in particular who's spoken quite a bit about the contraceptive campaigns in Africa, and how they do commonly, show up, implant women, and then leave. Or, they'll give you a free IUD, but then if you want to take it out, you have to pay to have it taken out. And there's just so many examples of this. And, we're talking about Africa, but even several years ago, there were cases in Baltimore public schools where school nurses were implanting young Black girls with Nexplanons in their arms, completely unbeknownst to their parents. There were daughters coming home with bandaged arms, and mothers asking them, "What happened to you at school today?" "Oh, well, I went to the school nurse and she gave me birth control." So it exists in a lot of different forms. I'm trying to find the word, the disparate power dynamic that when we introduce birth control and devices that women can't control themselves, it can just really spiral from there.
Well, it's a very paternalistic view of medicine. It's what we're all saying. And so I think that that's what's so concerning, because it's, first of all, paternalistic, even with birth control, how we say, oh, you just take this. And then couple that with the lack of education on other alternatives. And one of the most kind of natural and easiest ones are fertility awareness-based methods. And that can be taught. That's something very easy to do in the privacy of your own home. I think it's very intuitive. And it allows even teens, girls, adult women to get to know their bodies. I can't tell you how many times my patients tell me, when I explain, again, the hormones and how these markers reflect our changing hormones and how they can tell us where we are in our cycle, that they say, I had no idea. This is the first time I have actually understood this about myself. And it's very freeing. So I think both of these, it's like the dual sides of that coin, but it all translates into, again, us needing to be in control of it as women.
Yeah. I guarantee all three of us, Hana, Dr. Rabal, myself, we have all heard from a client, from a doctor at some point, why wasn't I taught this before? When you start telling them about how they can track their cervical mucus, how they can track their basal body temperature, that's the refrain we hear over and over again. Like, you could put it on a t-shirt, why wasn't I taught this before?
Yeah.
Because it's really simple.
What I hear a lot when they do come off hormonal birth control, like, I feel like myself again. I hear that a lot, which is really interesting. Just like that, Dr. Rubel, you were talking about the flat line that is created with the synthetic hormones and hormonal birth control. And it's almost just like, I don't know what wave of feminism we're on, but like another wave of feminism that's like, we don't need to be like men to succeed in a man's world. Because that's really what a man's hormones are like, are more flat. And so women's are cyclical. And I think there's so much power and beauty in that, but
absolutely,
we're totally disconnected from it. And if you don't know that that's how it works, and that it's a power. And I think too, so many people are suffering from true hormonal imbalance and suffering from just their painful periods or endometriosis or PCOS. And, I don't think anybody should have to suffer, and if that helps them in the meantime, but just as long as people know that it is just a Band-Aid. It's good that it can maybe offer you some relief right now, but some people think it's literally the solution to their endometriosis, or the PCOS is the only option. So I think that's a really big thing as well for them. A part of the informed consent is, there's other ways.
If you're just tuning in, or you just kind of got shared this, or it's on your social media, we are live. So feel free to post comments and or questions in the chat below. We are discussing the film, The Business of Birth Control, a documentary by Ricki Lake and Abby Epstein. And we have 3 great presenters. Our next question, I would love for you, again, why am I here? I'm a father, I'm a husband, I care about women's health. And being so educated, this film is so good. I want to be able to talk to my daughters about this. So if you know men who need to get educated, please share this link. This will be available beyond this time live. But what would you talk about? Could you talk about the natural alternatives to birth control? The documentary touched on fertility awareness method, but can you explain it? And can you also talk about the daisy or the natural cycles and what you think about that?
Yeah, it was, I feel like I had to rewatch the documentary and be like, wait, did they explain what the fertility awareness method was? I feel like they touched on it. And so, yeah, I'd love to explain what that is. So I'm a fertility awareness method educator, and the basis of it is charting your cervical mucus and your basal temperature, which just means your temperature in the morning with a specific basal thermometer, and those two things will tell you when you're ovulating. So it's all about pinpointing exactly when you're fertile phase, and with real data that your body is giving you. And so it's Tony and I were just chatting earlier, just kind of like the rhythm method versus the, or even predictive apps. That's kind of what is most popular nowadays. Is you put your period and the cycle length in an app, and that predicts when you'll be fertile. And so that's technically the rhythm method, and that's what gives the fertility awareness method such a bad rap, because the rhythm method is only 75% effective. It's in the depends, but the fertility awareness method, it can be 98 to 99.6% effective. So we have so much more information now. You can actually pinpoint, I ovulated today or yesterday. No, actually, you can pinpoint it the day after. So that's what it is.
Hana, I think we might have done a combination of both of those. We had this little thermometer thing. It was like a round thing. I don't know what you called it. My wife
the lady comp.
The lady comp.
Uh-huh.
Is that the fertility method?
Yes. So that
okay,
is.
So we use that.
Precursor to the Daisy. So they do mention the Daisy. The Daisy,
okay.
The documentary was backed by the company Daisy, and the parent company makes Lady Comp.
The Lady Comp, y'all. This Lady Comp thing was a thing.
Yeah, it's like $500.
14 years ago. This is like an investment, like of a month of our oh my gosh. But it worked, and all three of our girls. That's how it worked. So yeah.
Yeah,
so keep going.
Yeah, when I first was told about the fertility awareness method, it was a friend of mine. You know her, Tony, Lisa LaRock, and she's like, yeah, you can use the fertility awareness method, and I just laughed at her, that's what people did before the pill was invented. And then I had heard about the lady comp, and I was just like, oh my gosh. But once I learned the science, I was like, it makes sense. And so to touch on the second half of your question, Tony, about the Daisy and natural cycles, that's another company similar. I'm so glad that these tools are invented. It's awesome that people can use it. You take your temperature, and then it tells you if you're fertile or not. And really, it's just a glorified, you don't have to kind of learn how your body works. So it's really handy in that sense. But I love the education portion of it as well. And so when you I just use a $15 thermometer. So that's like a basal thermometer. It's different than a fever thermometer, but then I just enter it into an app, but it doesn't predict for me when I'm ovulating. And so you have to interpret your own chart, which I like to do, where Daisy does that for you. So that's kind of the main difference of the Daisy. I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts on Daisy.
I mean, I would just like to say that this is, I'm borrowing this from someone, and I can't remember who I'm borrowing it from. So if you're out there listening, whoever came up with this, I apologize. But the rhythm method is to the modern fertility awareness method as Jerry Seinfeld's car phone is to the iPhone in your pocket. Yeah. So there's a line of evolution there that's clear, but to equate the two is to get things really wrong, because modern fertility awareness methods, like Hana said, can be extremely effective, as effective as the pill or more, actually. And when you see these really wide ranges given, thankfully, so the CDC used to just give a blanket 23-24% failure rate for all fertility awareness methods, right? Now they actually give a range. They say 2% to 23%. And that's because they wised up a little bit, and they realized that the rhythm method wasn't modern fertility awareness methods. They don't parse that out on their website exactly, but at least they give a range. So that reflects, that there are methods that involve, watching one's fertility, watching for signs of fertility that, can have a 2% failure rate, and there are ones that can have a 23% failure rate. And the reason why the rhythm method was on that higher end of the failure rate was that it was predictive. It wasn't using the real daily signs of a woman's biomarkers, her cervical mucus and her basal body temperature. It was just taking the dates of women's periods and kind of predicting when about they might ovulate each cycle. And so it was about, yes, it could change. And so it was about 75% effective, which, you know, actually condoms aren't that much more effective than that, to be perfectly honest. So, you know, this isn't to tell anybody, go use the Rhythm method. I want you to use a fertility awareness method that's based on science and your daily biomarkers. But, you know, at the end of the day, the Rhythm method actually wasn't as bad as people like to say it was. But yeah, the modern methods where you're looking at your biomarkers, you're charting your biomarkers when you know what's going on with your body are both really empowering and really effective. And to speak to the femtech kind of that's come out, the Daisy and the natural cycles and the apps and that sort of thing, my, you know, general advice that I give to people is, you know, use an app that's asking for more information of you than just the dates of your period. Because if they're just asking for the dates of your period, it's just the Rhythm method cloaked in code. You need to have an app that's asking you about, at minimum, your cervical mucus, maybe also adding on your temperature and some other different things, cervix opening, cervix position, those sorts of things can be added. But at minimum, you need to have an app that's asking you a little bit more information than just when your period starts every month. So.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with Daisy and natural cycles is that it gives off this impression that we need something smarter than ourselves to figure out our fertility.
Yes.
And I always tell people, yes, fertility awareness methods have a learning curve. But if you can learn with an instructor or a course and put in a few months of effort, like I always say, like after 3 months, you get a really good grasp of what your cycle is and how it works.
Yeah, well, they've taught the Billings method to women with no or low literacy.
Yeah,
all around the world.
Very simple.
Yeah, they've taught it to
little
blind
effort.
women. They've taught it to women across cultures. This is not, you know, it's really insulting actually to imply that women can't figure this out for themselves, and that either they need to just get on the pill or they need to just have a set it and forget it LARC, an IUD or an implant, because at the end of the day, this is just too much for women to deal with. It's too much for them to figure out. It's really, really insulting, frankly. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox on that point.
I would say that my thought on this is, what are fertility awareness-based methods doing? What they're doing is they're giving you, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, a surrogate marker for you to understand when you ovulate. And that's important because we know that there is a fertility window, and they address this in the film. And again, this is something that is not always necessarily common knowledge. You cannot get pregnant at every single day of your cycle. There's actually a 6-day window of time during which you can conceive that month. And it ends on the day of ovulation, and it's the 6 days leading up to that. It peaks 1 to 2 days prior to ovulation. And so that's the time frame you're either trying to become pregnant or avoiding in many ways. And so that's why it's important. So to use any of these surrogate markers to give us an idea of when that time frame is going to be is what's going to help you. And those markers, there are so many. And so what I like to tell patients is, first of all, you can choose whatever you like. My goal is to decrease people's stress. So it's whatever method's going to be the least stressful for that couple and for that patient. And I also think that your needs may change, or your kind of a preference for one approach or another can change. You can layer them, okay? And they go anywhere from, again, the calendar method that you guys are remarking upon. And that relies on the fact that we know that after you ovulate, it should be a fixed phase typically. And so it should be 2 weeks. And so you can kind of count back from when you start your period 2 weeks prior to that. Typically in a normal cycle, you should have ovulated then. And so you can deduce it based on that. But the other ones include the cervical mucus that we're all mentioning. I would say cervical mucus is my favorite one, probably for just its ease, because most women can tell when they're having that fertile type of mucus, which is what we call that raw egg white. It's increased amount. It's clear. And we know that within 3 days of getting that, you're going to ovulate. So it's a really kind of easy and predictive way prior to ovulation. But we can also use different urinary or blood tests. Obviously, the blood tests can become very invasive. And so I do really like urinary-based hormone measurements as well, though, because again, I like the ability to predict when ovulation is going to occur. And then finally, we can use ultrasounds, again, kind of invasive and requires, physicians or other people who can help monitor that. And then the basal body temperature, which is what we've been focused on as well, which relies upon the fact that progesterone, which is produced after ovulation, increases the body's set point. And so you can absolutely get an idea by combining these different approaches. I always encourage people, maybe if they're trying to avoid, for either to take caution of just using only thermometer-based methods, which isn't typical, because that temperature shift is going to happen after ovulation. But I think in conjunction with some of the other ones, again, like I said, to layer them can be really helpful. And again, really empowering, as we're saying.
I'm so glad you mentioned you told your clients, whatever is less stressful or fearful. I think there's so much fear in coming off from hormonal birth control. And what I always tell people is I'm never worried. I know when I'm fertile. And so it's that practice portion of learning fertility awareness method that gives me such full confidence. So that's what I want for people when I work with my clients, when they take my courses. I'm just I want full confidence for you that you don't have that fear, that worry, because I know people are still worried even on birth control, on hormonal birth control. And so I never have that worry, and that's what I want for more people as well, to just know exactly when they're fertile.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to quickly see if you all want to address June's questions really quickly. She's been told that birth control puts women in a pseudo-pregnancy state or a menopause-like state. I think the documentary might have addressed that. She wants to know about that accuracy. And then, does coming from a generation of birth control users cause fertility issues in the second generation of girls or women? So first question, anybody want to quickly address that?
We actually have an article specifically addressing that on Natural Womanhood. So it's kind of a shorthand to say that it sort of induces a pseudo pregnancy. It's not entirely accurate. What the pill does is make your body think that you've already ovulated, and so that you won't ovulate again. That is, in a nutshell, what it does. It's an easy shorthand to say it induces a type of pregnancy state, because when you're pregnant, you're not ovulating. So I think that's where that kind of comes from. And similarly with menopause, if you're in menopause, you're also not ovulating. But it's a little bit different, because in those states, at least in when you're pregnant, your body's still producing endogenous hormones. It's working really hard to produce progesterone, for one. And when you're on the pill, like Dr. Ribal said before, you have this steady state flat line of this low dose of synthetic hormones that you're taking that's leveling out your cycle. So it's an okay shorthand to use, but really what it's doing is just making your body think essentially that you've already ovulated and won't ramp up to ovulate. So
Thank you. And the second question.
I kind of have a bit of an answer to the second question, in the sense that what I find with fertility issues is that people come off hormonal birth control and want to get pregnant right away. And it breaks my heart how many clients I get because I also have a course to teach women the fertility awareness method to get pregnant. And when they've been on hormonal birth control for so many years, and if they went on it not for just contraceptive purposes, but maybe for painful periods or endometriosis, or they probably weren't diagnosed with that yet, just all these other symptoms, they never got to the root cause, which then could lead to their infertility issues. And so that's what I see the most, is just hormonal birth control masking. Our bodies are always trying to tell us something. So they're masking those signals that our bodies are giving us, like something's off, and then never addressing them all the way until I want to get pregnant. And it just breaks my heart, because infertility is such a heartbreaking struggle that I've walked with many of my clients, my best friend, that I wish people had that information sooner. They just started charting sooner. And so that's what I do in my courses is they learn how to chart, and your chart can tell you so much. So that cervical mucus we talked about, that temperature we're talking about, it tells you your estrogen, your progesterone levels. It tells you so much about that. And we can see, something's off. And then I'm like, okay, go see a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath. And then I can send them in the right direction to really get to the root cause. So that's what I experience the most in the work that I do.
Really good. The links are in the chat, so you can follow up at hanawellness.co. In our remaining 10 minutes, I'd love for you all to share some closing thoughts, but just specifically talking about women can do to support their body and hormones holistically, and what one would do if they wanted to come off of birth control and regulate their cycles. You want to start, Dr. Rubel?
Sure. I would say that, first of all, we know that the birth control pill can impact certain vitamin levels, and there can be these micronutrient deficiencies just at baseline for a very amount of reasons in our current world. But I would say just making sure at the minimum to be on an appropriate multivitamin or prenatal vitamin, and it's specifically one that will have a methylated B vitamin component, and there are certain types that may be more effective than others. Okay, that is one relatively easy tip with a very low risk profile for people to be on. We know also that there can be an impact on other vitamin levels besides the B. So vitamin D, again, so prevalent as a deficiency issue, can also be involved. And so to kind of get those nutrients on board, not only with that supplementation, but really through food as medicine. So a lot of what I'm doing with my patients is we're really, again, harnessing those nutritional changes in women I'm seeing preparing to go off of pills through what they're eating, so that we make sure that they're achieving adequate intake as much as possible. And then we're supplementing after really getting some labs and levels, so we know where they stand. Those are two important factors. And then, of course, if for whatever reason, after you go off, you aren't having normal periods, which we absolutely expect you to have regular menses by 3 months afterwards, then that is the time to go in and seek care to understand why. Because there is a whole host of hormone imbalances that absolutely can be addressed, that can be helped, not even necessarily having to rely upon pharmaceuticals to do so. But at that point, then you should seek help. Or you can always reach out to people even earlier so that they can walk alongside you with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything Dr. Rubal said was obviously just excellent. We're actually going to have a webcast on naturalwomanhood.org on April 12th, where we're going to address how to get off the pill, get off of it for good. Because unfortunately, a lot of women, and Hana touched on this earlier, a lot of women get off the pill, and then any issues that they had prior to going on the pill, so endometriosis, PCOS, come roaring back with a vengeance. And then a lot of women just decide, gosh, why did I even think this was a good idea to get off of this? I need to get back on it. Mm-hmm. And that's largely because I think women are told that they have no other options but to go on the pill to regulate their cycle, to quote unquote regulate their cycle. And doctors, unfortunately, don't have the time or the wherewithal to dig a little bit deeper and to figure out, well, why are your cycles so horrendous? If it's endometriosis, what can we do to actually treat the root cause? If it is PCOS, what can we do with your diet? What are our surgical options? Because it's just simply not true anymore that if you won't go on the pill, that there's nothing that can be done for you. And I know so many women hear that. And if you take away anything from this, from me in particular tonight, I would like you to know that you have options beyond the pill for treating painful periods, for treating terrible acne, for treating really heavy periods. You don't have to, feel like you're bleeding out every month or be on the pill and be depressed. There are other options for you. And getting off the pill doesn't have to be a miserable experience. You can do things to support your body as it's transitioning off of these synthetic hormones. And I also want to be clear, we say the pill, but we're talking about, any kind of form of hormonal contraception. So there's the hormonal IUD, the hormonal implant. And so when you're transitioning off of these synthetic hormones, there are ways to support your body in that process. And there are doctors who can help you walk through that process and finally get the root cause treatment that you need. And even if you're not trying to currently get pregnant right now, it's something that will pay dividends down the line if that is something you decide that you want, because you'll have treated those issues that, can so often lead to infertility in women. And it's just an investment in your health. It's an investment in your future. And you can do it. So
I'm so excited for that event of yours. So Dr. Rubel will be there, and Dr. Laura Bryden's actually in the documentary. So that's really cool that you get to talk to somebody else who's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hana, do you want to give some closing thoughts? Andrea is also asking about webinars that help parents talk to older children about this information.
Yeah. Would that be a good one, Grace? I don't know. Yeah.
There's a lot of really great resources out there already. We have a lot of them listed on the Natural Womanhood website. But yeah, there is a movement of what I see, largely younger moms like myself, and who want to say, well, how can we break this chain? And it's education. It's educating our daughters. It's educating the next generation to love their bodies, to respect their bodies, to understand how their bodies work. And there are definite, awesome, age-appropriate programs out there for teens and even younger. And I would invite anybody to go to the Natural Womanhood website, and we have a section on teaching teens that's really helpful.
Good. I'm excited to see the future of the teens. It's like we gotta reach the moms and then the parents, the dads too, like Tony, and then
teach boys too. Teach boys, not just teen girls, but teach boys too.
Definitely. I think you guys said it all too, of those next steps for coming off the pill for sure.
Well, why don't we just go around as we do kind of our final. I know the conversation is not going to stop here. If you signed up for this or you watched the film and wanted to do the Q&A here, you will get a follow-up email with all the panelists' information. But can you all just really quickly go again real quick, just for posterity's sake, so those who watch on the replay can have you hear where they can find you on the web.
Yeah.
Hana, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm on hanawellness.co. You can find Hana Wellness Co. on Instagram as well. And so that's where I have my 2 main video courses teaching the fertility awareness method to avoid pregnancy or to achieve pregnancy.
Fantastic. Dr. Rubel?
I as well have a website, laurenrubelmd.com. And I'm also have restarted on Instagram. So you can find me at Lauren Rubel MD there as well.
Awesome. And Grace?
So I'm the editor of naturalwomanhood.org. We have a website. We have Facebook. We have an Instagram. I believe we have a TikTok now too. Trying to reach the younger generation. I don't run it. I told my boss that I was too old for that. But we do have those social media resources for those who want them as well.
Yeah, and I would love to hear like people who join, or if you watch the replay, to post and tag us about your feedback and your takeaways from the film. Oh, I'm so excited to hear.
We live in a social media world, so it doesn't end with this live video. You can go and follow all of these great presenters, and please connect with Hana, tag her, tag BraveMaker. And if BraveMaker can help you with sharing your brave stories in the future, let us know. You can find us at bravemaker.com. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we really exist to create change in culture through stories, through storytelling and information and education, especially through film. So thank you so much. This was really cool. Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah.
I love hearing all this stuff. And I honestly, the documentary, I watched it while my daughter was doing her horseback riding lesson, I was on my iPad watching. I was like, this is wild. So I'm grateful, and I really wish you all the best. And I pray and hope that we can see more women's health be centered in culture and elevated and given the space and attention that it deserves. So
Thank you, Tony.
You got it.
Thank you, Hana, for organizing
That's
this.
right.
Of course, this is so fun. Thank you all. Love it.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks all. Bye.